the first layer before adding the carbon, and then let the carbon just absorb it, and it's amazing how much better that works, and you just watch it soak it up. You can see you got areas like this that get tricky because it's a pretty deep curve, but just kind of pull it, and again, thanks to Air Sally for telling me about the 45-degree method, which definitely does help. You can see with all that, still have dry spots even with all that epoxy I put on there. So some gets soaked into the paint, some goes into the glass. Another weird thing I noticed that was happening, I was talking to P-Dog about this. Weird, you know, if I use 2-part white, I don't have any issues with the color change, the white changing color with the epoxy. But I don't know if it's just the epoxy I use now. I haven't tried it with others, but with the AdTech 820 epoxy I use, it was yellowing all the white if you use rattle can white. Now I'm not having that issue when I'm backing it with black, so that's working out. But yeah, it's definitely a weird thing that's going on. Even though the epoxy is clear, it changes the it's changing the color of the white. Just getting a little hair bristle from the brush. Those cheap Harbor Freight brushes will come apart on you. But yeah, so you know, the rattle can white is definitely not something good. If I was going to paint a fuselage in the mold, I would not use rattle can white. I would use a good 2-part white paint. I'm realizing now if I wanted to show people how to do this, better view would probably be overhead, because you can't see what I'm doing here. Try to tilt it this way so you can see it. It's pretty just a tedious process. But definitely cool and rewarding when you open up the molds and you hear that crack and the parts pop out, and you know, you look back 2 days before that and you had nothing, and you know, you were painting molds, and then you pick it up and you're like, oh, there's the paint that I painted a few days ago, and now it's apart. So I don't know, some people might just want to buy stuff and you know, don't care how it's made, and there's other guys I think that are a little fascinated by the whole process of making a composite part and want to do it themselves. So definitely it's a learning curve. I learned pretty much everything I've done with this on YouTube. Probably 80% was on YouTube, and then the rest was just talking to guys on RC groups, picking their brains. So it's not anything that the average person can't do. And it's just experimenting with stuff. And you know, sometimes you spend a lot of time, you know, making a part, and it gets stuck in the mold because you experimented with a different kind of paint. Or I'm definitely having an issue here with this part, having a bubble. So you know, you get a part that sticks in the paint sticks in the mold, or you try a different kind of epoxy that doesn't set right, or it's not hard enough. So there's definitely things that could go wrong, and I've probably experienced all of them. But it definitely is. It's definitely a cool, rewarding thing when things worked out well. Like with this, I didn't know when I popped that one out of the mold yesterday. I didn't know how that was going to work because I had not used the rattle can white and the black combo, and so that was the first time. So this is the second time. Man, this is really a challenge here with this one. Sometimes, at least I'm sure that, like I said, the professionals don't have to do this, but occasionally, if I have an issue like this and I just can't get this to lay down, and I have to cut it and make multiple pieces, I'll do it because you don't see it under here anyway. Doesn't affect anything structurally to have a couple pieces. That's all cosmetic. But I find many times you just keep playing with it and lifting it up, moving it back down. You see it's starting to happen here. Little patience. It's funny, and pretty much everything else I don't have patience, but with this stuff I can sit here for hours and try to fiddle with it. 1.5 millimeter screw to fit in a hole, but my wife asked me to work on a house project and I give up after 2 seconds because I just don't want to do it. Alright, almost done with this. I've seen guys, I'm amazed, like the sailplane guys, the molds they make and the parts they make, they will cut their glass the exact size that they need, and they don't even have to trim anything. Like all this, they don't even have this excess. I don't know how they do that. I've tried it, and just picking up the glass, I change the shape of it. It gets warped, so that's definitely not something I'm ever going to be able to do. So I'm fine with trimming. All right, we're getting there here. A few more air bubbles. Okay, let's see what we got here. This is our first layer, so we want to do the best job we can of getting all the air bubbles out because we don't want to have an issue inside the duct and pull a piece of paint off and suck it through the fan. So, alright, so that looks pretty good. Just trim off a little bit of this. Scissors are crappy. That just messed that up by doing that. Should have left well enough alone. That wouldn't have hurt anything to have a little extra glass there. It's like 6 in the morning right now, so trying to get this done before kids get up. Got 4, 2.5, and a 3-month-old. So the hours of 5 to before going to work are prime building hours, and then of course after everybody goes to sleep, if I'm still energized. Alright, so now we are going to really slap this on. So I used a I know I'm mixing standard and metric here, but I used 25 grams of epoxy, which I don't typically need to use it all, but I think that works out. Is that like a ½ ounce, I think? So if I use, you know, a ½ ounce of epoxy and then the glass, and then you got the areas that, you know, the thickened epoxy too, which kind of learned to keep that lighter, using a lot more micro balloons, but that with the glass ends up working out, like I said, comes out to 1.5 ounces per duct. Stock ducts are just over an ounce, but man, I'm sure you guys can attest to, anybody that has a Spark, those things are really flimsy. I don't think they were not designed for the power systems that we're putting through them nowadays. So, you know, they were running them on 10 cells and 2,500 watts, and now we're doing 7,000 watts. So definitely need more than a little more reinforcement than what they originally designed it around. So now I could wrap this with one piece of carbon, but what I found was it's nice to have a seam where you have an overlap, you can't, on the Spark you can't see it anyway, and you got that double layer, so you get the 5.7 ounces doubled, so it's basically like almost like 12 ounces in that area. So it's like a strip of reinforcement across. Anytime you have a flat area like this, it's going to be a little weaker. So I'll start on that side. So I just want to make sure to do this right. So all right. So I got inside. I want the overlap to be on the inside of the plane where you don't see it. So I just want to make sure, I gotta think about it for a second, make sure I get it right spot. So yeah. So put right here. Just checking to see how long. We're at 40 minutes so far since I started mixing epoxy. Again, you guys can't see this. Start to see it in a second here. Start to turn it. And so this is what I was talking about when I said, you know, I really want to slap on the epoxy